We were the Ythari, the undisputed masters of the galactic core. For as long as our records stretched, we had been the dominant force in this part of the cosmos. Other civilizations had risen, but they had all fallen before us. Some we crushed. In battle, their fleets reduced to nothing more than drifting wreckage. Others we enslaved, their cultures erased and rewritten to serve our needs. None had ever truly threatened us. None had ever made us feel fear. Our technology was second to none. Our warships were constructed from materials that could withstand the heart of a star. Our weapons could shatter moons, erase continents, and bombard planets into lifeless husks in mere hours. The Ythari had ruled through superior might and unmatched intelligence. We were the apex predators of the void, and so, when our outer patrols detected a lone warship of unknown origin crossing into our space, we barely took notice. A single vessel, no fleet to support it, no reinforcements in sight. It was large, yes, far larger than we would expect from a solitary craft, but that did not concern us. If anything, it was amusing. Some lesser race had wandered too far from its nest. Perhaps it was a lost explorer, or perhaps it was foolish enough to believe it could pass unnoticed through our domain. The name of its creators appeared in our database. Humans. The name meant little to us. We had heard whispers of them before, primitive beings from a distant system, barely more than a blip on the galactic stage. They were a relatively young species, only a few centuries into space travel. We had monitored their expansion, noted their reckless aggression, their stubborn will to survive, but they had never come close to our borders before. They had never posed a threat. We saw no reason to change that view now. Standard procedure dictated that we scan all intruders. It was the most efficient way to assess a potential threat before engaging. Our scanning technology was unparalleled, capable of stripping a ship down to its most intimate details, mapping every deck, every bulkhead, every energy signature. With a single sweep, we could determine its armaments, its weaknesses, its purpose. It was an act of both dominance and intelligence gathering, one that had ensured we always held the upper hand. The order was given, and our long-range scanners powered up. A pulse of energy swept across the void, reaching out to envelop the human warship. The data streamed back to us, pouring into our systems at a staggering rate. Then, without warning, everything went wrong. Alarms shrieked through our ship. Our scanners flickered and overloaded, systems crashing under the sheer weight of the incoming information. Our engineers scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The data wasn't just unreadable, it was impossible. And as we fought to make sense of what we had just witnessed, a terrible realization settled over us. We had made a mistake. Our scanning beams washed over the human warship, probing its structure, its power sources, and its armaments. The initial readings came in as expected. Composite alloys, energy emissions, standard signatures for a species with relatively recent interstellar capabilities. Nothing unusual, nothing unexpected. Then the numbers began to shift. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. The energy readings fluctuated as if the ship's systems were adjusting in real time, compensating for our scan. That was unusual. No ship we had ever encountered had reacted this way. Scanners were passive by design. They observed, they did not interfere. And yet, the human vessel was responding. The power output spiked. The ship's core signature, originally comparable to a standard fusion drive, ballooned into something far beyond conventional understanding. The readings suggested that the vessel's primary reactor wasn't simply generating power, it was containing it, suppressing. An energy source so massive that our instruments refused to calculate its full potential. Then another alarm. A new data point appeared. The ship had a secondary power source, a backup reactor. That alone should have been insignificant, yet when our systems analyzed it, the result sent our engineers into a panic. The backup reactor by itself An auxiliary system was producing more energy than our entire fleet combined. That was impossible. The errors cascaded from there. The ship's hull composition, initially detected as a simple alloy blend, suddenly reclassified itself into something unreadable. The material absorbed scanning waves, bending them, redirecting them, as if it was aware that it was being examined. We had never seen anything like it. Weapons systems. The first analysis showed conventional plasma batteries, projectile turrets, missile bays. Nothing beyond what any warship would have. But then, new readings emerged, contradicting the first. There were weapons signatures that didn't conform to any known technology. Spatial distortions, gravitational anomalies, energy spikes that matched theoretical models of weaponry we had only ever dreamed of constructing. A message flashed across our consoles. Data corruption detected. The scan was failing, not due to interference, but because the data simply did not fit. It was as if we were trying to comprehend something that existed beyond our ability to perceive. Our systems, built over millennia of scientific advancement, were unraveling under the weight of the impossible. Then the final reading came in. The warship had moved, not physically, not through any conventional propulsion, but in a way our instruments couldn't fully register. It had shifted, displaced, itself within the fabric of space, as if acknowledging our presence. And then a new transmission appeared on our screens. Did you enjoy the look? Now it's our turn. The human vessel had let us scan it. It had allowed us to see what it was capable of, and now it was going to do the same to us. Panic spread through the bridge like wildfire. Officers scrambled to make sense of the data, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief. Our scanners were state-of-the-art, refined over thousands of years, tested against countless civilizations. Never had they failed. Never had they been wrong, but now they were spitting out numbers that made no sense, values that defied physics, readings that contradicted everything we knew to be possible. Our war analysts argued among themselves, some insisting that this was a deception, an elaborate trick designed to disorient us, but even the most skeptical among them could not explain how it was being done. A deception required a basis in reality. Something tangible, something measurable. What we had seen was beyond mere illusion. The engineering officers fared no better. They worked frantically to reboot our systems, to purge the corrupted data, and re-establish control, but the damage had already been done. The ship's central processors had overheated, unable to reconcile the impossibility of what they had just analyzed. Cooling vents spewed thick plumes of gas as the core struggled to stabilize. It was as if our very ship had recoiled in fear, rejecting the knowledge it had just acquired. And then the human warship moved. It was a subtle thing, a shift so minute that it should have been insignificant. But something about it set every nerve in my body on edge. It was not a tactical repositioning. It was not an evasive maneuver. It was something else entirely. It was deliberate. For the first time, I felt something I had never known before. An instinct buried deep within my mind, something ancient, something primal, a warning passed down from the ancestors who had once walked on solid ground before we took to the stars, a warning that had been irrelevant for countless millennia. Predator. I looked at the screen, at the massive construct floating in the void, and I understood with absolute certainty. It was looking at us. A silence fell over the bridge, a suffocating weight pressing down on all of us. The chatter stopped, the alarms faded into the background. Every officer, every technician, every soldier aboard the command ship felt it at the same time. We had been noticed. For eons, we had been the watchers. We had been the ones who scanned, who observed, who dictated the fate of others. The lesser species of the galaxy cowered in our shadow, their fates decided by our will alone. But now we were the ones being watched. I tried to speak, to give an order, but my throat tightened, my voice refusing to come forth. It was as if the ship itself was waiting. Then, without warning, our long-range sensors went dark. No explosion, no energy surge. One moment they were functional, the next, nothing. The human vessel had disabled them, remotely. We had spent our entire existence believing we were the apex predators of the galaxy. But we had just learned, in the most terrifying way possible, that we were not. The bridge was deathly silent. Every officer frozen in place. We were still receiving the human transmission, their message repeating on our screens in flawless Ythari speech. Did you enjoy the look? Now it's our turn. I felt my stomach twist. It was not a threat, not a demand, not a boast. It was a statement, a fact, cold and undeniable. Our long-range sensors were dead. Every external scan rendered useless. The ship's internal diagnostics were still functional, but they told us nothing we didn't already know. We had lost control. Our systems were still powered, still operational, yet somehow cut off. It was as if the human ship had plucked us from the physical universe and placed us inside a sealed box where nothing could enter or leave without its permission. And then the scan began. We didn't see it. There was no visible energy beam, no wave of light, no flickering of space, but we felt it. It started as a deep hum in the ship's structure, a resonance that vibrated through the metal, through our bones, through our very minds. My vision swam, my skin tingled. I clenched my jaw as something unseen reached into me, past my body, past my thoughts, deeper. The ship trembled as data flooded its systems, but this was not like our scan, which had merely pulled information from an external source. This was something else entirely. The human warship was not simply scanning us, it was dissecting us. I saw the fear in my officers' faces as their terminals flooded with information they had not requested. The ship was learning everything about us in real time, our weapons, our shields, our technology, our fleet movements, our communication protocols. But that was only the beginning. It went deeper. A communications officer collapsed, clutching his head, his eyes wide with horror. Another screamed, falling to her knees. I staggered back, my breath coming in ragged gasps as something, not a machine, not a program, but something alive, crawled through my mind, peeling away the layers of thought, memory, instinct, the human. Ship was not just reading our computers, it was reading us. It saw our history, our conquests, our empire built upon the bones of the weak. It saw the planets we had burned, the civilizations we had erased, the countless species we had subjugated. It saw every war crime, every atrocity, every act of brutality we had committed across the eons. We were laid bare, stripped of all deception, all arrogance. And then, as suddenly as it began, the scan stopped. The pressure vanished. The humming ceased. The screens flickered back to normal. My officers, those who had not collapsed, staggered to their feet, their expressions hollow, haunted. A new message appeared, cold and final. The verdict is guilty. I had no time to process the words before the first ship in our fleet vanished from existence. The destruction was unlike anything we had ever witnessed. There was no explosion, no debris, no wreckage drifting through the void, just absence. One moment, the battleship at the front of our formation was there. The next, it was gone, erased as if it had never existed. Gasps and choked cries filled the bridge as we watched, frozen in horror. Our minds couldn't comprehend what had just happened. There had been no weapon discharge, no traceable energy signature. It was as if the laws of physics themselves had been rewritten, as if the ship had been plucked from reality and cast into oblivion. Then it happened again. 2 more ships, heavy cruisers bristling with weapons, simply ceased to be. No sound, no struggle, just empty space where they had been. Our fleet was dying, without a single shot being fired in return. "Raise shields," I barked, the order tumbling from my lips out of instinct more than reason. "Shields are active, Commander," an officer confirmed, but his voice was thin, brittle, as if he already knew it was useless. And it was. Another ship vanished, then another. It was impossible. This wasn't combat. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. A new horror settled into my chest as I realized the truth. This human warship wasn't fighting us. It wasn't engaging in battle. It was removing us like a scientist cleaning a petri dish. Cold, methodical, absolute. I forced my trembling fingers to open a fleet-wide channel. "All ships retreat. Full reverse, maximum speed." It was an order no Yathari commander had ever given. We never retreated, but this was not a battle we could win. It was not a battle at all. The remaining ships in our fleet reacted instantly, engines roaring to life as we turned and fled. Pride, honor, doctrine, none of it mattered anymore. Survival was our only concern, but it didn't matter. The human warship followed, not with haste, not with urgency, just precision. It was not in a hurry. It did not need to be. A battleship ahead of me flickered and vanished. A destroyer to my left winked out of existence. Our numbers dwindled with every passing second. "Commander!" one of my officers cried. "We can't escape. It's toying with us." I clenched my jaw, my hands balled into fists as helpless fury burned inside me. We, the Yathari, had always been the hunters, the predators. We had never known fear. We had never run, and yet here we were, running, dying, losing. Another ship disappeared, then another. My fleet was being erased, one by one, until soon I would be the only one left. The vastness of space had never felt so small. I sat paralyzed in my command chair, my body rigid, my mind screaming at me to do something. But what could I do? The human warship was not a foe to be fought. It was not an enemy that could be reasoned with. It was a force of nature, an executioner, with no hesitation, no mercy. Our fleet, our mighty fleet, was gone. Only my flagship remained, surrounded by the empty void where dozens of warships had once stood. Veterans of countless campaigns, war machines that had laid waste to entire civilizations, reduced to nothing. The bridge crew was silent. No one dared speak. Some sat in stunned horror, their hands trembling over their controls. Others had shut down entirely, their minds unable to process the impossible. We were the apex species of the galactic core. We had ruled for eons, unchallenged, undefeated, and in a matter of minutes we had been humbled. A final message blinked onto our display. Unlike the cold, clinical statements before, this one carried something different. Something worse. "Run." Word sent a shiver through my spine. Not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. They were letting me go. The human warship had dismantled our fleet with the ease of a being swatting insects, and now it had decided it was finished. I had expected total annihilation, the inevitable extinction of my crew, my ship, myself. Instead, they were giving me a choice to live, to remember. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stared at the word, burning into my mind like a brand. I had thought in those final moments that I would die with my crew, that I would face the void and disappear into oblivion like the rest of my kind. But no, they wanted me to carry this message. They wanted me to return to my people, not as a hero, not as a warrior, but as a warning. I opened my mouth to order an attack, to fire everything, to lash out in defiance, to refuse this humiliation. But no words came. My hands, my claws, my very soul rejected the idea. No. I could not fight this. I could not win. A heavy, painful silence filled the bridge as I forced myself to utter the words that no Yathari had ever spoken before. "Set a course home." The navigator hesitated, looking at me as if I had gone mad. But there was no argument left to make. He turned back to his console, and the engines roared to life. The human ship did not follow. It did not interfere. It had made its point. As we sped away, I dared to look at the screens one final time. The human warship remained where it was, its dark silhouette against the stars, and as it faded into the distance, I realized the terrible truth. They had never feared us, they had only waited. The journey home was the longest I had ever endured. Not in distance, we had traveled far greater expanses of space before, but in the unbearable weight that pressed upon my chest. We had entered the battle with a fleet, an armada of the finest warships the Yathari had ever built. We had left with only one. The silence on the bridge was absolute. No one spoke. No one dared to. There was nothing to say. My crew sat in their seats, staring blankly at their consoles, at the void ahead, at nothing. The hum of the engines, the distant flicker of the stars, these were the only sounds that remained. The weight of our failure crushed the air out of the room, leaving us suffocating beneath an invisible force far greater than gravity. I replayed the battle in my mind, over and over again. It had not been a battle at all. It had been a lesson, a demonstration. I had once believed that we, the Yathari, were the apex of all things, that no species could stand against us, that no force in the universe could humble us. That belief had been shattered. The humans had done what no other race had ever managed. They had looked upon us and found us wanting. They had judged us, and they had spared me. The thought sent a shudder down my spine. They could have wiped us all from existence. They could have erased our entire empire the way they erased my fleet, ship by ship, without so much as a weapon discharge. Instead, they had left me alive. Not as an act of mercy. No, I understood now. This was something far worse. I was meant to return. I was meant to tell our leaders, our high command, our war council what had happened. The message was clear. Do not come again. We entered Yathari space, and the homeworld came into view. A gleaming jewel of technology, a fortress of dominion, that had never known true fear. I once looked upon it with pride. Now I looked upon it with dread. The docking protocols were initiated, and the moment we entered orbit, we were hailed. The War Council demanded an explanation. Where was the fleet? Where was our victory? Where was the crushed enemy that we had promised to bring to its knees? I closed my eyes. How could I make them understand? How could I tell them that the humans were not our prey? That they had allowed us to live? That we had spent millennia believing ourselves to be the ultimate power in the galaxy, only to discover we were nothing more than children playing with fire? I stood as the transmission connected. The council's faces appeared before me, expectant, eager, waiting for my report, and with the heaviest heart I had ever known, I spoke the words that would change the course of the Yathari forever. We have made a mistake.